Hello. This evening we are going to talk about Chanukah. Before we come to learn Hashem's wisdom, let's begin by asking Him to open our hearts and our minds to His teachings and take them deeply within us, reforming our inner landscape, and then to actualize those teachings in His world, because we are taught that this is actually the purpose of creation. It's expressed in various ways by our Chachamim. One of them is making a dwelling place for Hashem among the Tachtonim, or in this physical world. Another way of expressing it is it is our job to what's called enhance Kovod Shamayim, or heaven's honor. Another way to express it would be to fix our own midos. When we fix our midos, the traits and the measure by which we express ourselves in this world, this perfects our interactions with God, with each other, and even with the depths of our own being. I'd like to talk to you this evening about light and darkness, because that's really what Chanukah is about. It's a light that we Jews have held on to throughout this long, dark galus or exile, where the external shell of things appears so solid, so real, so important, that the inner life and truth of existence can be all but obliterated before our eyes. The celebration of Chanukah is one of the very last vestiges of Judaism, which even extremely assimilated Jews hold on to. Now, we could say that this is because it occurs in such close proximity to the holiday season of the non-Jews among whom we live, or that it's because it demands so very little of us. There are no forbidden malachas, no time-consuming mitzvahs or complex laws to be kept. Simply the lighting of a few candles, a couple of brachas, and then fun and celebration. While these factors certainly do exist, they are really only a covering, like the gray rock which hides the magnificence of the geode that it encompasses. My grandson gave me this geode. It's quite beautiful, isn't it? It's really just a piece of one. Look at the outside, dark, gray, solid. If you didn't know that there was anything special about it, you would never imagine to even bother looking inside. Let's try to chip away at the surface of Chanukah and find some of the beauty within. Let's begin with a brief look at the historic events surrounding this holiday. Our story occurs during the era of the second Beis Hamikdash, or Holy Temple, in Yerushalayim. According to Rav Art Scroll, the entire era of the second Beis Hamikdash is considered a time of Golus, rather than a time of Geula or redemption. This is because when, after the story of Purim, the Jews were allowed to return and build the second Beis Hamikdash, most of us didn't go back. Life in Eretz Yisrael was very difficult. Great yeshivas were already established in Bavel. The community in Eretz Yisrael was very, very poor. We all can hear the reasons echoing in our own lives. Also, the Beis Hamikdash wasn't rebuilt to perfection. The Shekhinah, or the felt presence of Hashem, was missing. And for the greater part of this period, the Jews did not live under their own autonomous government. On the physical plane, the story of Chanukah is in no way one of unmixed happiness and success. The Greeks, quote, inherited Eretz Yisrael through Alexander the Great's conquest of the Persian Empire, which had retained control of Eretz Yisrael until this time. When Alexander died and his empire was divided, Eretz Yisrael became first part of the Seleucid dynasty, which ruled Syria. Then later, the Seleucid Syrians were forced to cede it to Egypt, then back to the Syrian Greeks, sort of like a ping pong ball. During this time, there was a great deal of infighting among the Jews, as can be the case when wealth and power can be obtained through contracts from the government to collect taxes and such things. Since the Kohen Gadol was considered by the government to be the leader of the Jews and therefore responsible for the collection of taxes, even this holy office was sought after by many unscrupulous people as well. The Greek Empire was large and quite diverse, and Antiochus IV wanted to impose Greek culture and religion as a means of unifying his empire. Need I go on? Jews, who we call misyavnim, or those who associated themselves with the secular powers that be, egged on the Greek leadership, establishing a gymnasium in close proximity to the Beis Hamikdash, where athletes performed in the nude, and sacrifices to Hercules were made before the games began. To gain further power and financial advantage, the Misyavnim lobbied for more and more repressive laws against the Torah-observant Jews. Finally, the king made a declaration throughout his realm, but specifically aimed at Eretz Yisroel, that all people must relinquish their customs and religion and conform to the dominant culture. Disobedience carried a death penalty. In line with this decree, an order was issued that altars and temples should be set up throughout the land for idol worship. The service in the Beis Hamikdash discontinued, and the Beis Hamikdash itself converted into a pagan temple. Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, Kashrus, and Bris Milah were all forbidden, as well as the laws of family purity, and even the use of Hashem's name. All copies of Torah and holy books were burned. Anyone found in possession of them was to be executed. At this point, the stage was set for the rebellion of Matisyahu and his sons. Without detailed storytelling, the rededication of the Beis Hamikdash and the story of the miracle of the oil occurred approximately 3 years after the beginning of the unlikely rebellion of Matisyahu and his sons, who were initially a very ragtag band of rebels with no real weapons or battle experience against the most powerful military force then extant. The rededication of the Beis Hamikdash was just that, signifying the ability of the Jews to perform the temple service. It took more than 20 years of fighting before the Jews had any real autonomy in their land. During this time, 4 out of 5 of the Maccabee brothers were killed, and even when some autonomy was achieved under the remaining son, Shimon, it wasn't until his successor, Yochanan Hyrcanus, revolted that Seleucid rule was completely removed. This was a short-lived independence, lasting only 70 or perhaps as much as 105 years, depending on the source we look at. And even this is not a happily ever after story, for the grandchildren of the Hashmonaim, as the Maccabees were called, were becoming assimilated themselves, and the next leader, Yehuda Aristobulus, declared himself king. But the kingship belongs to the tribe of Yehuda, the house of David. The Hashmonaim could lead when there was no other fit leadership in the country, but the Rambam explains that the tragic result of their claiming a role for which the Torah had not given them authority, assuming that they could be somebody who they simply weren't, was the complete extermination of the Hashmonai family at the hands of Herod near the beginning of the period of Roman rule, leading up to the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. We think of the eras of Greece and Rome, who is its inheritor, and its extension, as times of enlightenment, times when wisdom, art, architecture, government, athletics, philosophy all took giant leaps forward. Yet our tradition teaches us that Greece and Greek culture is darkness. How can that be? We can understand that it was repressive, but dark? How could that be? I learned from Rabbi Tatz that when we want to understand anything in its primal form, we must find the first place that it's mentioned in the Torah. To find the conflict between light and darkness, truth and falsehood, we won't have to look very far. Light and darkness are expressed in the very first Pesukim of the Torah, and the conflict between good and evil is seen in the story of creation as well. When Adam and Chava were placed in Gan Eden and told they could eat from any fruit of the garden that they wanted, except from the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra. And even that was only to be forbidden to them until Shabbos, from Friday afternoon till Shabbos, when the fruit would be ripe and would no longer be harmful to them. Evil was existing, but it was in the form of the Nachash. The Yetzer Hara, the inclination to evil, was there, but it was external. When we failed that test and took evil within us, we began the struggle which has accompanied and been the defining feature of all of humanity and world history ever since. In every good thing that we do, there's some unworthiness, there's some ego, some desire for power, some selfishness. In every evil thing that we do, there's some little drop of truth, of goodness, because nothing could exist without a spark of godliness within it. Adam wanted to show that he could give Hashem more than what Hashem was asking, that he could stand up to this test and sort out good from evil. He didn't understand what a gigantic crash he would cause for himself and for all of us, since he was a neshama klali, and we are all little aspects of that soul, which is Adam and Chava. The parshas that we are currently traveling through in the Torah speak even more distinctly to our issue. Yaakov and Esav were twins. When their mother, Rivka, was pregnant with them, she felt them fighting within her womb. It was tremendously painful to her. When she passed a beis medrash where God's truth was being taught, she felt a pull as Yaakov tried to get out. When she passed a place of idol worship, she felt a pull as Esav tried to get out. She was so disturbed that she went to the yeshiva of Shem Ve'ever and asked for an explanation and said, "If this is the case, why did I so yearn to become pregnant?" She thought she was carrying a schizophrenic child. She was reassured and told, "No, you have 2 children within you, and they are fighting." What are they fighting about? They are fighting for the rulership of Olam Hazeh, of this world, and Olam Haba. Now, Olam Haba is a spiritual world. If Yaakov wants Olam Haba, and Esav wants Olam Hazeh, this world, the physical world, there should be no problem whatsoever. Let each one have what they want, and everybody can go about their business happily. However, both Yaakov and Esav realized that this was not the case. You can't have one world without the other. The spiritual world, without a body, without a place and the tools to actualize the mitzvahs that Hashem gives us, can't serve its purpose. It can't accomplish what it was created to do. And a physical body, a physical world with no spirituality, a body without a soul is simply a corpse. So Esav needed the spiritual world to enliven his body so he could enjoy this world. And Yaakov needed the physical world in order to fulfill his spiritual purpose. What they were fighting about is what we call the difference between ikar and tafel, between that which is of essence and that which has a supporting role. Now, I don't know how many of you are listening have children, but anyone who has packed a lunch for a child or even for themselves on their way to work and decided that a banana would be a really nice snack might be aware that if we would take the banana, remove the peel, stick it in a paper bag, and drag it around with us all day until lunchtime, when we take it out, that banana is not going to be very appealing to eat. The peel is important. It's needed. But its job is to protect the banana. We don't want the peel in and of itself. We only want the banana. Esav said the physical world is the banana. And Yaakov said no, the spiritual world is the banana, and the physical world is meant to be its support. Western culture, represented by Greece, Yavan, or the Torah view. This is the conflict. Is God here for us, and we're the main point of the creation? Or are we here for God? And God is the main point, and our job is to be here to fulfill His will. Who holds ultimate reality, wisdom, truth, authority, existence? Is it us or is it God? I think that if we look inside ourselves with any integrity whatsoever, we all know that there was a time before we existed, and no doubt there will be a time after we exist as well. As B'nai Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the children of our forefathers and our foremothers, we know that we live in a God-centered universe. But Western culture does not see it that way at all. The goal of the Yavanim was never to destroy the Beis HaMikdash. When Alexander first conquered Eretz Yisrael, he was enchanted with the wisdom and the beauty that he found there. He wanted to include Jewish wisdom with the wisdom of all the other peoples in all the lands that he had been conquering. The real point of conflict was not with the Jews or the wisdom of the Torah, but with God Himself. Of course, the Yavanim had gods. They had lots of them, petty creatures who bickered with each other. These gods were made in the image of man, not even the highest elements of man, but simply reflected our petty desires and yearnings for power. But that man is made in the image of God, that man, with all his intelligence, wisdom, creativity, is not the ultimate absolute reality around which everything else moves, that only God and not man has absolute reality, that was completely antithetical to the whole Greek view of the universe. And Rome is the inheritor and extender of that philosophy, and Rome is Western culture. We are still living, swimming through the Galus of Edom, the exile of Rome. So what is so special about those little lights? What really are we celebrating? The Chanukah lights appear so simple. Small festival lights commemorating the victory of the Maccabees over the oppressive rule of the Syrian Greek armies. The story of Chanukah that we read in the Shemona Esrei doesn't mention the miracle of the lights at all. It does speak of the miracle victory, making clear how improbable, impossible, it was in the world that we call Teva, or nature. As if anything could exist separate from the will of Hashem. The Ramban teaches that there is not really any such thing as nature whatsoever. What we call nature, or Teva, is just a consistent pattern of nes, or miracle. The Shemona Esrei speaks of the motivation behind the decrees of the Yavanim as being to cause the Jews to forget Hashem's Torah, to remove them from the decrees of Hashem's will, and that the efforts of the Chashmonayim were able to repair the breach in our collective consciousness. But what about those lights? They're so small. They only need to last 30 minutes or so. What do they remind us of, and what is their message? Everything in Torah is infinite, and no single answer can fully explain such a question, but at least we can start. The story goes that when the Jews re-entered the Beis Hamikdash, they found it a total wreck. With the holy vessels gone and idols set up, all the jars of oil had been broken, or at least their seals had been broken, causing the oil to be contaminated, to be impure. None had the seal of the Kohen Gadol intact, but really, they could have lit the menorah in any case. In such a situation, when the majority of the people are tameh or ritually impure, the law would permit lighting even with contaminated oil. The Sfas Emes, as quoted by Reb Moshe Brown, brings a teaching from the Gemara that the Greeks defiled all of the oil in the Beis Hamikdash, and only one small jar of oil was found. If it was all defiled, how could any be found? The Sfas Emes asks, is it possible that the Greeks overlooked any oil? Hardly. This small jug, some say it's the jug that Yaakov went back to collect on the very night that he wrestled with the angel of Esav, was hidden by a nace. It took up no space at all, just like the Aron HaKodesh that was inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the holiest place in the Beis Hamikdash. Just like our soul within our body, which is spiritual and infinite, but uses no space, this little jug, like our soul, could only be found with yearning and desire. And when found, it shines with such brilliance that not only does it enlighten our own being, but it lights up everyone and everything around us. There is a custom to light the Chanukah lights in the doorway of our home, across from the mezuzah. The Sfas Emes teaches that if you want to receive holiness and blessing, you must open the doors of your heart. You will then be filled with yearning and heightened expectancy. While the treasure is within our hearts, it's an inner light. But when we begin to actualize the teachings of this light, it becomes public. When something goes out into the public domain, destructive elements from the public domain can contaminate it. The doors of our heart need protection. Through an open doorway, anything can enter or leave. The mezuzah allows holiness to enter, and the Chanukah lights protect the holiness from being lost. The light of spirituality, the knowledge that we are at Tselem Elokim, is meant to shine throughout every aspect of our being. This is the idea of Presume Nisa, of publicizing the nace, yet it needs protecting from damaging, contaminating influences. If Chanukah lights were lit where they are likely to be blown out, they're not kosher, even if by some chance they don't get blown out. We are told that the lights that we light on Chanukah have within them the light of the Or HaGanuz, that spiritual light from the 6 days of creation, with which Adam Harishon was able to see from one end of the world to the other. Hashem hid it so that Rishayim, evil people with evil intent, would not be able to make use of it. But it is there. It's in our Chanukah Lecht. It's in the Torah. Just like our neshama, our soul, a spark of the infinite taken from under the Kisei HaKavod, Hashem's holy throne. Enclosed and disguised in a physical body, it is our job to make it shine throughout every aspect of our being and every aspect of creation that we can in any way influence or touch until V'yimaleh ha'olam kulo b'chavodecha, the whole world is filled with Hashem's glory.